Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe Digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening, and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American owned and operated broadcast studio. We're being seen live all over the world. We're in 139 different countries. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. You can call in and join our show tonight at 800-492-5186. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to us. It enables us to get this broadcast out to you 24/7. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this broadcast with your friends and family. Also, we want you to send us stars. Stars is how we monetize the program, and your contribution is tremendously important. If you're watching us on the website, WeBelieveDigital.com, then we want you to hit the donate button. Send us a contribution. You know, we need finance and we need financial support to bring this cutting-edge technology into the marketplace. There's no other news outlet in the state of Mississippi that is doing what we are over here at WeBelieveDigital.com. We're the only news media outlet that covers all of your stories in your churches, in your community, in politics, but more importantly, we do it in the way of videos. Our videographers are on top of their game, and we chronicle and store and archive all of the information for decades to come. And you won't find that in the Mississippi Free Press, and you won't find that in WYAB over with my friend Kim Wade over there, who shows out every day. You won't find that in the Jackson Advocate, and you just won't find that in the local television stations and the major media outlets like MPB and the Clarion Ledger. For example, let's say that you wanted to see the episode that ran last week on the subject of Black empowerment and reparations by Socrates Garrett Live. All you have to do is go to our website, go to the category of hot topics, scroll down till you see Socrates Garrett Live, and it'll show you right there that there are 69 editions of Socrates Garrett Live housed right there in the archive. You scroll down to the date that you want to look at the program and view it again. And why is this tremendously important? Because that history is preserved for you and your grandchildren and your children to come. Nowhere else in Mississippi are you going to be able to do that. Let's take the category of inspiration that's there on our website. Inspiration means that all of our religious content is housed under inspiration. But for us, we're able to bring 100 preachers to you at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Not one, like WLBT, you just get one. But here at We Believe Digital, you'll be able to access over 100 preachers. So let's say you want to watch Bishop Crudup at New Horizon Church at 8 o'clock. He's playing live on his channel under Inspiration at We Believe Digital. But you also want to watch Reverend Pickett, Dwayne Pickett at New Jerusalem Church, who happened to also come on at 8 o'clock live every Sunday morning. You simply switch over to his channel and watch him. If you want to go back and forth, that's completely up to you. Our goal is to have 100 pastors featured in our 8 o'clock hour on WeBelieveDigital.com. We're going to institute a new program pretty soon, and we're going to identify the top 10 preachers in the state of Mississippi under the age of 40. We think there's some tremendous talent out there, and we think that there's some people that have been touched, and we think that they would never be known unless We Believe Digital brings them to the forefront. And we're going to get down from the top 10, we're going to get down to the very top preacher under 40 in the state of Mississippi. So Jason Goree, the pastor over at New Horizon Rankin Campus, you better get on top of your game, because We Believe Digital is going to showcase the talent that we have here in Mississippi. Again, you can do that with We Believe Digital in any way that you choose. Our categories consist of a broad range of activities like entertainment, sports, and Black Lives Matter. And we mean when Black Lives Matter, we don't mean that it's something that was here today and everybody was upset about it and next week it's gone forever. Not here with We Believe Digital. Not here with We Believe Digital. That incident will be housed under Black Lives Matter, and it will be rerun until we get satisfactory response that it has been elevated to the highest media outlets in the country so that something may be done. Case in point, the world does not know it, but down in Smith County last week, there was an incident where a black man was actually hung. You heard me, right? There was an incident there, and the black community rose up to the point that they were armed in the community with AK-47s, and on the other side of the street, we had our white brothers armed in their pickup trucks as well. So here we are in 2023, where blacks and whites are squaring off against each other, armed because of the way things are done and because we believe that Black Lives Matter. So you'll be able to find that story here under Black Lives Matter inside of the website on WeBelieveDigital.com. And I could go on and on and on about the wonderful things that we have coming here in this broadcast studio. For example, coming next week, we'll have James Hull reporting live from Cleveland, Mississippi. All of the things that are going on up in Cleveland, Mississippi, that are mirrors of the things that are going on in Greenville, Clarksdale, and the Gulf Coast. But they'll be coming live on We Believe Digital, and you'll be able to see what's happening in Cleveland. We'll also have the news coming to you from Hattiesburg, also from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So we're going to feature those incidents and activities that are dealing with black folk in black hotspots. What are black hotspots? That's where we have the majority of our population that has been corralled and has been, corral is a good word. They are surrounded in urban ghettos now. Most of them are in places like Jackson, Mississippi, where I-220 surrounds the city, and blacks are in one particular part of the entire city, and they're fenced in by interstate, not by barbed wire fences, and the interstate is designed to allow the traffic to move around Jackson without even stopping. Now, when you build these kind of fences around our city, what it does is it destroys the economics and the character of the city. You know, one of the best ways to stop crime and to fight crime and deprivation and deterioration in our communities is to have light in it, to have sunshine in it, to have tourism in it. That's why when you see that the infinite wisdom of the white community decided that Capitol Street should not be a one-way street, because when it's a one-way street, the traffic zooms through it and no one stops. No one stops to deal with the vendors. So there's no economic exchange, and this city cannot be vibrant with traffic flowing through it. Well, Jackson and the black community is the same way. No one ever stops there. In South Jackson, we have a food desert where there are no black-owned and operated restaurants and no place for you to eat. There's no movie theaters and nothing for your children to do. And what do? They play war games. They have shootouts. They have high carjackings, and crime runs rampant. And we call them criminals and thugs. Some of us, though, in our wisdom and understand what's going on a little bit better than most, know that they are child soldiers. You know that you have exercises. We know that you train as you do in the seas against Afghanistan and Iraq, that where you put up your military organization and you have exercises demonstrating your muscle and your strength. So anybody who gets out of line will know what will happen to you if you dare cross certain lines. Well, they're having exercises in the black community, but our leaders don't get it. We think they're just acting crazy and being bad for no reason at all. But until these black warriors are given some leadership and some direction by people as to what they ought to be doing, then they're going to continue to committing these terrible crimes that we see every day that affects this entire city, this state, and the world. So it's clear now that something has to be done. So we here at We Believe Digital come to you each week, and we're going to deal with these issues and a lot more. And I look forward to the time when we have our daily news show, much like Bernard Shaw did for CNN when it first started, where we have news that's going on 24 hours a day. If you move in Mississippi, we got you. We want all of our correspondents out there with cameras and telephones to send us your videos, send us your drawings, send us all of your reporting to We Believe Digital. We are going to remote you in and put it live all over the world. That's our goal. We're well on our way to doing that, just like you're looking at me here now. So it's important that you support us. We look at the donor list for the Jackson Free Press and the Mississippi Free Press, and we look at the donor list over at Mississippi Today. And on the donor list, there are prominent African Americans listed throughout all of those lists. And yet in the news media and the outlets in the African American community, like the Jackson Advocate newspaper, the Mississippi Link newspaper, We Believe Digital, they have no donor list. There's something wrong, something rotten in Denmark. When we don't support ourselves, we don't understand the value that black media has in our communities, and yet we're the only place where your stories are archives. We cover your weddings and your funerals. We talk about the things that you do well. We talk about the issues in your community and the hurt and the pain and the sufferance that goes from a corrupt judicial system. We talk about the starvation of economics in our city, like we had when we identified that in the water crisis, where Jackson had not received any funding from the state of Mississippi, even though the state is a welfare state. We send $1 to Washington, D.C., and we get $3 back, and nobody talks about it. And our African-American legislatures have been compromised, and they're in a position where they're trying to serve two masters. And you just can't serve two masters. You're either going to love one and hate the other. But you just can't serve two masters, so you compromise, and therefore you can't say anything. I have not heard a legislature take to the podium and use his bully pulpit in the streets with a bullhorn to say that the issue of crime in Mississippi is not only relegated to black folks, but it's also happening in the white community as well. Case in point, there has not been one public hearing about the $97 million that was stolen from the poorest people in Mississippi, those TANF recipients. There has not been one public hearing by our legislative groups to say that something here happened under our watch that we got to correct and we cannot allow it to happen again. The reason you haven't heard that is because our people are compromised. They need to keep a job. It wasn't long ago, as I recall, as a boy, my mother teaching school and my dad a civil rights advocate, but mother was crying and pleading with him not to be an advocate because she was going to lose her job as a teacher. School teachers couldn't get involved in politics because they knew they would be fired. And so we have the same situation here today, but it's not school teachers anymore. If you don't want your mortgage called on your house, if they're not going to foreclose on your student loan, if you don't curtail your activities and be in line with what the master wants you to do, then you can't advocate. But that's why there's a need for We Believe Digital right here in the state of Mississippi. So goes Mississippi, so goes the rest of the world. Now, I've gone on for a long time, but we're going to go on for more and more and more. I'm going to donate and designate the next 20-minute session completely to my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, a man amongst men, a man who needs no introduction, a man who has lived in Mississippi most of his life, only got out of here because of the Army and got an opportunity to see the rest of the world. Had not been to the Army, he would have been destined to a life in the Mississippi Delta or in Mississippi, period, where you were involved in the poorest state in the nation with the worst economy. So I'm going to come back to Dr. Henderson. So we're getting ready to go to a station break. And when I come back, we're going to let him tell us about the things that are important for Mississippians right here in Mississippi. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this message.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live in 139 countries. You can find us on YouTube, Roku TV, on Facebook, and WeBelieveDigital.com. Join us on any platform that you choose. This is the only news outlet that's going to bring you the kind of conversations and the topics that we cover, unapologetically truth, coming from We Believe Digital. Now, my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, is a man that was born in the Mississippi Delta on the plantation. So I'm not going to be listening to someone talk about something they read. We're going to be listening to somebody talk about something they lived, that they understood. They know exactly how it was in Mississippi. Dr. Henderson, welcome, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So I wanted to say something before you ask me a question. It appears that we have a lot of doom left that we have to deal with in America. We don't have, from what you just told the people, any semblance of justice and equality in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation, and in the world. And it makes me believe that times are worse in 2023 than they were the last 50 years. We're expecting some tough days ahead. And what you just told us made me feel angry and made me feel nervous, sir, because I don't see a bright future as things are moving today.
Well, Doc, it's true. Things don't look really good, but we are celebrating one of the greatest African-American leaders of all time, Dr. Martin Luther King, right here in the city of Jackson. Probably got the largest parade of any city in the world celebrating Dr. King's birthday and his legacy. What kind of man was Dr. King?
Well, I would give you my analysis of King, and I'm looking at the history of the man. I'm sort of familiar with both. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great man. He's from great parents. He had a great education, and he was a hard-working, focused man. But he had been trained by the human enemies of mankind in their institutions to believe that you're supposed to turn the other cheek to your enemy. And he was believing that you're supposed to take all the abuse in the world, love your enemy more than yourself, practice integration, and forget about self-determination, and at the same time beg people to give you respect when you are already codified in the Constitution that you're a non-entity and you're not even a human being. That's what I find that one of the shortcomings of Mr. King and his supporters. He was supported in most cases by the liberal special interest groups that had a plan that is designed to destroy black people in economic development, in religion, in leadership, and then give them what I call a civil tit of acceptance so they can see that they are important and give them some false leadership positions with no power, no money, and no influence.
Well, let me ask you this. Dr. King's model seemed to have been coming from the model of Gandhi. And Gandhi was looked upon as one of the great leaders of all time that believed in nonviolence, believed in boycotts and sit-ins. That could have been from the fact that they believed that direct confrontations would have been bad for African Americans. So what do you say to Gandhi's philosophy as well as Dr. King's?
Well, at that time, as far as Gandhi was concerned, he didn't have a choice because he didn't have the weapons, he didn't have the means of production, and he had to use non-resistance, non-violence tactics, and beg people to demonstrate and catch hell for at least 15 or 30 years before he got a chance to have a semblance of independence. And Martin Luther King Jr. and his cohorts did the same thing. Instead of promoting self-determination versus integration, they would have gotten more respect instead of going around begging white folks and others to do what they should have been doing in the beginning. For instance, every time we had a war in the United States, from the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and all of them, the black leaders had to beg the Americans to let the blacks be included in the war. Beg them, demonstrate it, say we're going to march on Washington. If you don't pass some kind of affirmative action that's going to give blacks a chance to get in the war so they can die for injustice and non-democracy.
So blacks actually participated in the Civil War.
All the wars. And they were excluded initially from all of them, and they begged to get in the war to fight for a non-democratic regime, which we call now the United States of America.
So let's deal with the issue of Malcolm and Martin, who were here basically in the same period of time, but different philosophies. So was Malcolm correct in his approach to what African Americans needed to be doing?
Of course he was. He was 100% correct. Because if you look at what he was promoting, self-determination, economic independence, and if you look at the history of the Nation of Islam during that period, those guys, even those that what I call the downgraded, unnecessary, evil characters, previous to their associated with Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, they were trained into real men and real women that wanted to determine their destiny through their own collective actions versus begging somebody to give them a grant or begging them to go and fight and kill somebody so you can get justice later, begging somebody to vote for it, to pass a voting right bill, begging someone to give me a little money so I can move with you in your suburb, on and on and on. But Malcolm X said we can use our collective resources, we can educate ourselves, we can buy land, we can build businesses, and he proved it up until the day he died with a limited number of black people. Now, believe it or not, he had more influence secretly than Martin Luther King and his boys had.
Well,
they had more respect for him than Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, this comparison and this different approach goes way back. It goes back even to Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Two different philosophies between those two men. I believe that Booker T. Washington wants you to put your buckets down where you are. That, make the best of your condition where you are, and you didn't need to worry about anything else. And Du Bois believed that we ought to have the Pan-African Conference and things of that nature. So tell me a little bit about those two men.
Well, those two guys were great men. One was timid, one was progressive. Booker T. Washington said that black folks don't need to have equality in America because they don't have the economic means, they don't have the education. So what we need to do is get our people trained so they can have skills and the will to take care of themselves financially, educationally, and so forth. We don't have to go to your school. Give us some money so we can build our own school. We don't have to go to your churches. We don't have to join your social clubs. Du Bois said just the opposite. Say, let's get 10% of our best students and put them in your businesses, in your colleges and universities. What about the 90%? Booker T. Washington said, let's train 90% to be independent. Now, when you look at 10% versus 90%, you will see a significant difference there for people that's getting ready to do something and gain independence. And when you have independence, you're able to protect yourself, you're able to fight back, and you get more respect. Anyone that can defend himself using whatever means necessary going to get more respect than one that's going around hollering and squalling and praying and turning the other cheek.
Well, we got to go back and deal with the history and the psychology and of the leaders that came before up to this point. We can never forget. One thing we all know that the Jewish community has said is that we will never forget. And they make absolutely certain that doesn't happen. African Americans, though, don't tend to remember much. We don't tend to remember the struggles of Frederick Douglass. We're talking about Martin now, but when we're talking about Martin, it brings up all of the other great African American leaders that have come before us. And so why is it that we don't learn from the accomplishments and achievements and the mistakes that have been made by previous leaders?
Well, that's very simple. And the reason is by design. Now, you hear me using this often. Things are done by design. Now, why would you allow the people that you hate, people that are non-citizen, can't vote, can't do anything other than what you allow them to do because you have the reign of power and the economic means to punish anybody that won't listen to you? Why would you go and teach someone to be independent? So you're going to keep folks like Malcolm X out of the school system. You're going to put King there. You're going to take people out of the school system like Elijah Muhammad that talked about the best strategy to promote black people. You're going to put somebody in like Andrew Young that was a good man, but he was a King follower, and he believed in integration versus self-determination. He looked out for his little group. He had that divorce theory. He and King and their supporters were that 10%. They cared nothing about the 90% to the point where they were trying to get them real power. They said, we're going to get you some voting rights without protection. So the voting right bill has to be changed and passed every 10 years. We're going to get you some housing rights. And the enemies of mankind, the human enemies of mankind, said, no, you all not going to have any housing rights. We're going to make sure that you don't stay with us, so we give you our old houses, our old suburbs, and we're going to move out and use your taxpayers' money and build new suburbs. We're going to build this highway system where we're going to cut your department of living in half with highways, with byways, as you said earlier, and you are not going to be an independent citizen. You're not going to be respected, and you're not going to live with us, and you're not going to attend our schools unless you can play basketball or football. Otherwise, you are going to be self-maintained, and we're going to control your curriculum so we can teach you what we want you to know. That's why you don't hear certain things about Booker T. Washington, much about Malcolm X, other than 1 or 2 days through Kwanzaa and maybe Black History Month, which now they don't use Black History Month anymore. It's usually like it used to be when I was a young man, Black History Week.
So let's talk about this for a minute. So out of Martin came Jesse Jackson and John Lewis and a few others down there, and those became our leaders. And then out of there came Al Sharpton and other folk like that became our national leaders. Were they effective?
Well, they were not very effective if you look at the economics and the history that these people promoted. For instance, most of those guys were supported by the Jewish community, other liberals that had money and leadership ability, and they always were in the background pushing Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, and all them others, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, to the front, and telling them through their loans and grants what to talk about and what to endorse. And they had black people that's living in Mississippi, New York City, and other places saying these guys are our leaders, they are our saviors, so when somebody get killed in our area, we're going to call for them. And they're going to send those folks down here to Jackson, Mississippi, cities in New York and other places for a day or two and talk about justice, reform, and what they're going to go back and tell the senators to do for black people. But they didn't say they were going to do that for the white folks. They were the handmaids of the local, state, and federal white supremacists that were in power to keep the status quo in America, north, south, east, and west, and all over the world. If a black man had the opportunity to do anything in leadership, in economic development, it was always curtailed to the point of destruction and death. Look at the Haiti situation. They gained independence many, many years ago. And if you read the history books, it will tell you that the Europeans said Haiti will never be a self-serving nation. And those that are pretending that they are independent, like those so-called black communities in Oklahoma, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Jackson, Mississippi, they would never thrive. During the King time, when they was running around talking about integration, black people were independent economically in many areas of the United States. And in 30 years, the strong base, economic base in Mississippi disappeared, in Jackson, on the coast, in New York City, in Harlem, in Atlanta. You go to those areas, Mr. Socrates, and I've been in all of them, they used to be thriving black areas. And now when you go to Farris Street in Jackson, certain parts in Atlanta that I used to visit in the 1990s, and other places, you find abandoned houses, drug addicts, prostitutes, and thousands of semi-homeless people that can't pay rent, living with cousins and relatives in cars, school systems falling apart. The churches are abandoning themselves by going out of business. They can't make enough money. The preachers now are getting ready to start looking for jobs. It is bad, and it's getting worse in America because of this integration, not looking out for your interests and believing in self-determination. Black people now, since they have been using that 10%, going to medical school, law school, and all these other so-called advanced degrees, they have the experience by working in banks as vice presidents, you're not going to find too many top black leaders in any institution in America, but they do have enough leaders where if they would pool their resources and build their own banks, their own drugstores, their own manufacturing companies, and where they're in the majority, rule 5 areas: education and training, politics, economic development, religion, and what I call leadership, you will have independence and more respect from the black nation throughout the world.
Well, the black nation is suffering. And what we got to do is we got to have some solutions for our folk. Now, one of the things that's critically important to us is that we identify effective policies and effective leadership. So even here in Jackson, Mississippi right now, we are having elections. We take local elections, and what difference does it make? Why is it that black people don't turn out and vote? What should the black community be doing, and who should they be looking for to lead them?
They should be looking at the current leaders and looking at their history for the last 15 or 20 years in Jackson, Mississippi. And they need to get in those old newspapers and look at the economic growth that we had in Jackson, in other cities, on the coast, in the Delta area, that were thriving during that time. But when black people start ruling these areas, white people were behind them, and they usually selected a black person that would listen to their demands and get compromised by giving them favorite acts of money, advice, and leadership strategies that's doomed to fail. They say, we put you in this position, boy. We put you in this position. We're not going to give you the money you need to be successful. And if you don't work, we're going to get rid of you and get someone else. So the black people don't have enough vision to pool their resources in the communities where they're in the majority and select their mayor, their council people, their supervisors, their preachers that are progressive, that believe in self-determination, that can create what we call an independent black community, which we don't have. I don't think we have no more than 2 or 3 in the whole United States. Independent black community that can take care of itself, that can go to the black bank and get some money, go to the loan company and get something, go and get insurance from the black insurance agents, go to the black school and learn real news and education and teach people how to learn about technology, automation, cybersecurity, negotiations, independence, problem solving, how to take care of families, how to reduce criminal activity in your community, versus some people now saying the National Guard need to come to Jackson, Mississippi. Say the Army need to be doing this and that. We don't need none of that if the people in Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, and other places throughout the United States, including those so-called wonderful northern states that catch more hell than blacks in Mississippi, I'm talking about the blacks, we can do it ourselves. Because we had the resources, we had a leadership, but we do not know yet how to build coalitions, pool our resources, put a strategic plan together that's itemized, that has a checklist, that has a timeline, with project managers, or you might want to call them something else, that will direct what we do as a family, as a group, and as a nation of black people.
Dr. Henderson, we're getting ready to go to a commercial break. This is We Believe Digital's broadcast studio. You're listening to a program, Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting all over the world in 139 countries. You can find us on Roku TV, on YouTube, on Facebook, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. You've been listening to Dr. Eldridge Henderson, a man that understands the history of African Americans and the suffrage and the pains and the achievements and the success that we have enjoyed, in some cases enjoyed, in some cases endured during our time here in America. And we're going to a commercial break, and we'll come back to our very last segment of tonight's program. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Okay, well, I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are very proud that you're listening to WeBelieveDigital.com. Today we are talking about the changes that must take place in America, especially starting in the South and in what we call the Southern region, all over the United States and Asia, Africa, and wherever there is a majority of black people living in what I call a continuous area. The problem we are facing now is because we have had a lot of charlatans that have been supported by liberals in their goals and objectives, and we mentioned a few, that were always running to the various cities and nations and states and conferences telling black people what to do. And at the same time, these black leaders that have been designated by special interest groups all over America, and I did mention some earlier, Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, A. Philip Randolph, and many others, all these people, in most cases, were getting more of their money from the special interest groups that practice racial discrimination and destruction and murders and lynching and segregation than they were from the members in the black community through membership. And when you control the money and the minds of people, naturally, if they want to continue to get your money, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to do what they tell you to do. A good example, when Dr. Martin Luther King started his journey, he was looking for integration, voting rights, fair housing, no lynching. He wanted to curtail all of those things. He was being sponsored by many hundreds of liberals, white liberals, that were coming all over the South through the so-called Freedom Rides. Many of those Freedom Riders were FBI informers, and they knew everything black people were planning to do. And many times I would be in areas during the years of the early 60s and late 50s where you would see the police doing all kinds of illegal things to black people, shooting them, beating them with water hoses, knocking them down, riding over them with horses, and have the people hollering and squalling for peace, and the FBI would be standing over there in their suits and their glasses on and say, this is a local issue. They have not violated a federal law yet. And you could go to jail. You could not be seen, and you'd be found somewhere in a river. This is what these people protested against in a non-binding way. But as the conditions increased to the point, ladies and gentlemen, where America just had to get worse economically, racially, and so forth, as far as black people were concerned, Martin Luther King and some of his cohorts start changing, and they start talking about self-determination. Martin Luther King and his boys were saying, wait a minute, we don't have economic justice. We have a war in Vietnam where they're spending money by the billions, and the black people don't have a decent house to live in. We're going to be in a position soon where we're going to be worse off than we are now. Guess what happened? He was assassinated. That's what Malcolm X was talking about before King started talking about it. When they started talking about meeting together, and they did meet together many times, and when the word was out that they might form some kind of coalition economically and politically, both got killed. Some of those charlatans that didn't get killed, they were compromised, and they were given jobs as mayors, ambassadors, and many other positions in the camp of the human enemies of mankind. And those guys were curtailed to the point economically where they didn't have enough money to improve their cities. They had citizens that had little or no education. Their family structure fell apart, and on and on and on. And today, 2023, our situation economically, politically, socially, and in education and training institutions are much worse today than they were for black folks 30 and 25 years ago. So starting this last decade through December the 31st, 2029, black folks are going to have to start pooling their resources in areas where they are in the majority and control 5 different areas of activity from birth to death. Anywhere there's majority of black people, they're going to have to start training themselves. And they can't get it in the public schools. Public schools are not designed to train black people to be independent. They are designed to train the black young people to be subservient to the master class. Many of our listeners don't like to hear that word, but that's the way it is. So if you want to change the leaders and make something happen that's positive in the black community, the black churches must get together on a denominational basis, ladies and gentlemen, and train their own politicians, train their own preachers, train their own bankers and corporate leaders. And in instances where they can't get involved in the educational system that is maintained by the government, they would have to do contracts with the public school system. For instance, if they are not in a position to have football and basketball in the church schools, they allow the students to go there. If they can't have big programs where they can have technology in the church schools, they can have some of their scholars to go to those areas and get that training and come back and build the church schools and training institutions to the point where they can have their leaders and their scholars. Call them anything you want. They will learn negotiation skills, learn cybersecurity, learn how to build drones, learn how to have the problem-solving abilities to solve any problem you might have in the community. This is what self-determination is all about versus integration. If I had all the money, all the power, all the pocket policy-making solutions, and the able or the ability to control those areas, I most certainly wouldn't want to train anybody else to have any leadership position. I would want to get people, put them on the payroll, tell them what to do, and make sure I didn't give them the resources to be effective, because they would put me out of business. They would take my jobs. They would take my resources. And this is what the nationalists are doing all over the world. They want to maintain the status quo. They want to keep the black community, what I call neutered, to the point where they are insignificant, so they can continue to say black people are not human beings throughout the world. They are savages. They don't take well to family development. They're not good leaders. And many of them are not, because they're going to make sure they don't have the resources economically to provide for the people. The infrastructure might be bad in a city or a county. Will they have enough support on the state level and the national level to get anything done, to fix the infrastructure? It'll take 30 or 40 years for it to happen. The school system's falling apart. Will they have a curriculum that's going to teach students when they finish high school that they have now the ability to go out and start their own business in technical and vocational programs? Of course not. You might have one school that has a so-called career development center where they teach 30 or 40 people a year. and they have 10 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 that need that kind of training. And then you have the people so divided economically and by class and race and all that kind of thing, until certain groups that's supposed to love each other hate each other and have constantly fought against each other since slavery. All of this is by design. Black people throughout the world have been told that you need to look like the human enemies of mankind, look like the Europeans. And as you all know, some of you can talk to your mothers and dads, and they would tell you, during slavery, the high yellow people usually worked in the house or close by the master because they were his sons and daughters, but they were still slaves. After slavery, the master sent those same kids to the colleges and universities that they invented, like Tougaloo College, Howard University, and many other schools throughout. And the real black student that had no education in his household did not attend college. And when the young people that started to go to these schools, when they were given certification to become teachers, they were teaching all over the United States in the black communities. They couldn't work in the white schools, so to speak. Then when people like Martin Luther King and others started talking about integrating the school system, the white folks said, no, we can't do that. So they started their own independent systems. And they started as independent, racist institutions that practiced what I call the religion of white supremacy. But when they found out they couldn't get government funds, like some of the schools were, they decided they were going to integrate. And if you look at the history of the racist white supremacist institution, most of them integrated two entities, football and basketball. Then they were able to get government funds, just like the public school system. And now you are finding that the leaders, and I call these the special interest groups, ladies and gentlemen, special interests, they are so bold now, they are saying you are going to get taxpayers' money and give it to private schools, public schools, parochial schools, religious schools, and anywhere, and you're not going to do anything about it, even though it might be illegal. But they don't worry about the law because they know their own judges are there, their own police officers are there, their own investigators are there to carry things on 10 or 15 years before we get to the Supreme Court. And at the same time, they are creating their own people, training their own people to take these positions so they can have that conservative bent. So when things get to the Supreme Court, and this has been historical, you're still going to have your judges to maintain the status quo on the local level, on the state level, on the appeal level, and at the Supreme Court. This is what is happening in America. This is what is happening all over the world, ladies and gentlemen. You find the biggest population in the world is in Africa, and the Africans have so much divided leadership until it would take 100 years for the Africans to have any semblance of independence if they continue with the same leaders they have. They have leaders that are doing what the special interest people are demanding all over the world. And if they don't do what they want to do with the contracts to give the European nations the oil, the gold, the copper, and all of those economic entities that builds the world, you're going to have a coup, and they will be kicked out of power, assassinated, bombed, and the country is going to be neglected economically until they punish them to the point where they beg the same people that destroyed the city to give us some more aid so we can have some independence. This is the cycle. But if you have self-determination, where you decide the policy, you decide who's going to wield the power, you train your own people, especially in education, in the religious sector, and in the business world, you won't have to be begging people to allow your children to join the military, to allow your children to go to the university that's being paid for your tax money. You can go if you choose, or you can go to your own that has the same standard. So, Mr. Socrates, this is what's happening. In 2023, we are getting worse. politically, less power in education and training. Our religious leaders are being adapted to the point where they love Facebook and YouTube, and you find that the corporate leaders can get to the point where they can't get beyond a vice president, so a lot of those guys got to retire early and start their own businesses. The parents and the structure of the family is at the lowest point in the history of the United States. We had more family unity during slavery without people getting married and right after slavery than even today. At least they didn't have the legal marriage during the slave period, but every woman and every man that had inability to produce were put together to raise their families. During Reconstruction, black people married, stayed married, tried to train and educate their children. They were making too much progress. And then the government got involved and said, we're going to have to get this thing back to where it used to be.
So, Dr. Henderson, let me ask you, we live in a state where there's about 3 million people. 40% plus of those people are African Americans, black folk. And 40% of those people are poor white folk. Why is it that blacks and poor whites can't come together and move this state forward?
Because they are not going to allow them to do it. The people that's in power, sir, the people that control the government, not going to allow it. They're going to always tell their white people, and this is what they're supposed to do if they want to maintain dominant positions in education, leadership, and politics, and industrial development, that we are better than black folks, and any of you all that associate with black people are not white anymore. You are a nigger lover, and you are not going to be accepted in a white society. And everybody want to have a semblance of independence, a semblance of power, and they love their own to the point, except black folks, that they're going to stay in the margin order and do what they're supposed to do and not be integrated into a society where they are rejected.
We are going to work on our brothers in Mississippi, those of you that are less fortunate than the top 10% of our great state. Poor blacks and poor whites need to come together, understand that our living conditions and our status and our economic situations are worse than anywhere else in America. I don't care what you say. In Mississippi, a state which refuses to expand Medicare, Medicaid for our citizens, turning down billions of dollars because we are just racist and in a deep red state, and we don't even want the assistance that we could possibly have. A state that sent back unemployment benefits because we felt like black folks were misusing it and wouldn't come to work if they continued to get that. A state that has continued to deprive the least of its citizens with policies and programs that are designed to keep people poor. Mississippi is a beautiful state. The climate and the weather and the rivers and the soil, there's nothing more fertile than the soil in the Mississippi Delta. Absolutely. We have poets on the Mississippi River. We should be booming greater than New Orleans and Atlanta and Jacksonville. We're blessed with the Mississippi River in our back door. But poor leadership, the lack of cooperation, and the division that keeps us separated will keep us on the bottom. We're going to do our part here at We Believe Digital. Catch us all of the time. Shows like this will be airing throughout the day. And so you can find us on Roku TV, on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform, on YouTube, and on Facebook. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching us on Facebook, share these programs with your friends and family and send us stars. If you're watching us on our very own website, WeBelieveDigital.com, we want you to hit the donate button. It's critically important that you do that to support us. This show has been brought to you by Socrates Garrett Construction Company and Earth Blend Coffee. Until next week, we want you to stay safe, enjoy the holidays, celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. He gave it the ultimate sacrifice. But remember, it's not a day off. it's a day on. We got to go to work, black folk. We got to go to work like never before, because Dr. Henderson says we got less than 7 years to do this before the race itself becomes completely extinct and irrelevant. Until next week, have a great evening. Good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcast